Welcome to TFP, the Theatrefolk podcast, the place to be for drama teachers, drama students, and theater educators everywhere. I'm Lindsay Price, resident playwright for Theatrefolk. Hello. I hope you're well. Thanks for listening. This is episode 150. That's a nice number. I like that. And you can find any links to this episode in the show notes, which are at theatrefolk.com/episode 150. So today we have a nice little combo. We have two little interviews here who both of these wonderful ladies are playwrights. And they are also teachers. We have Amanda Murray Cutalo, who is an English teacher, and we have a couple of her plays, Nice Girl and Typecast, which is one of our newer scripts. And then we have Taryn Temple, who is a Spanish teacher, and we have her play, The Redemption of Gertie Green. And what is great is that both of these lovely ladies are playwrights and teachers, not drama teachers, but they use drama in their classroom and they believe in the power of theater for their students. There is a place for theater everywhere, which I think you know, I totally agree with. So let's get to it. All right. I'm here talking to Taryn Temple. Hello, Taryn.
Hi.
How are you? Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Awesome. Tell everybody in the world where you are.
So I am in Topeka, Kansas. Woohoo!
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with Topeka. Long live Topeka, right?
That's right. We're the capital city of Kansas. So there you go. We got something.
We'll stand proud. I like that. Okay, so Taryn is the one of our playwrights who wrote The Redemption of Gertie Green. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're talking about issues. We're going to talk about using theater to explore issues. But the first thing I want to know is what is your background? What led you to be involved with theater?
That's a great question. So I have done theater through my whole life, but I went to a very, very tiny high school where we did one play or one musical a year. And I was that thirsty kid that always wanted more theater. So I found myself very lucky when I moved to Topeka for my job that I could coach forensics. I was the assistant forensics coach at my high school where I work. I'm a teacher there. And then I also was able to work at a theater camp in the summer and also perform in shows at a local theater, a local community theater. And so I was finally able to satiate that thirst for theater. I did theater through college as well, but you know, I was so excited to find that in my adult life I could actually do theater. So that is kind of my background for it, and I have the theater camp is what led me into directing. So I'd always been just a performer, and then I took a directing class in college, and then once I came to Topeka and started doing forensics and working at the theater camp, I started exploring directing a little bit more. And then directing led naturally into script writing. So that was kind of a natural progression for me. When you direct shows summer after summer, you start thinking about themes you want your actors to explore, and so that's what led me that direction as well.
Right. And why do you think, because it's one thing to maybe to be in school and to go, I'm going to be a performer, I'm going to pursue this. And then it's another thing to go, no, it's something I want to do it sort of in an education vein, be it at a camp. Do you teach theater or do you teach?
I actually teach Spanish. I'm a Spanish teacher by day. So, but believe it or not, there's a lot of elements of theater. So I have incorporated a lot of elements of theater into how I teach Spanish because it's something you just can't escape. So,
well, I think that is one of the things that I like about Spanish. I have so little teeny tiny bit of Spanish, but what I love about it is it's very imagistic in words and how words come together. But that is a whole different podcast. But
that would be a fun podcast.
That would be a fun podcast. But tell me how do you use theater in Spanish?
That's a great question. So the method I use to teach Spanish actually teaches through stories because you are much more likely to remember something if it's put in a story form. So for example, if I was trying to teach you the words green and hippopotamus, you might remember them. But if I told you that there was a green hippopotamus dancing on my coffee table, you get an image in your mind and you have an image of that. And then I might ask you questions like, what color is the hippopotamus? Where is the hippopotamus? What is it doing? And all of this is done in the target language. So you actually use the target language to tell stories and to ask questions about stories. The students create their own stories. We have costumes and props. And so we laugh so much. There is so much laughter, and that's another great avenue toward learning too. So that's how I've kind of incorporated my theater background into foreign language teaching.
Well, and how awesome is that? So it's not sitting there, conjugating, what's the difference between, they just left my head. The two big.
The AR verbs, the ER verbs. Oh, the Sarah and the Star.
That's the one. Those are the ones I was thinking of. Instead of, we're not conjugating verbs, but you're actually motivating students to think in this language and
it's amazing
too, make it come to life.
I have 6 different classes of Spanish, and I will tell, we'll do a story in each one, and the next day I will not remember them, but my students will just rattle off that story. I mean, it's amazing what they can retain because it's in a story format. So I think that the power of storytelling is universal for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And what a great, sort of, and that whole cross-curricular thing about just making learning lively and come to life.
Yes, very much so.
Oh, I love that.
And using it to do something, not just learning things, but actually using it to do something. Yep.
Yeah, so that active. Oh, that gives me a little thrill. I love it. Okay, so using theater in your classroom, but so that leaves me. I'm going to circle all the way back around to where I started. This was that there is a different tact, isn't it? When it's like, oh, I want to be a performer. It's like, no, I actually want to be a teacher, and I want to put this into working with students. And how did that work out for you? Why was that sort of something you wanted to do?
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I've thought about that before. I think I've seen a lot of kids that are shy or timid or unsure just blossom through doing theater. And I think I saw it, way back as an actor. And, as a teacher, that's one of your goals, is to give your kids confidence and to give your kids an avenue to blossom, to really show what their gifts are. And I've seen that happen in theater. And so I think that's something I continue to pursue. The more I see that happen, the more you want to see it happen. It's a great thing to see. So the more ways I can see that, I think that led me to that profession. It was very
rewarding too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Not to put words in your mouth.
No, it really is. You feel like you've made a lasting change. They may not remember a certain word or phrase, or, as a forensics coach, they may not remember what piece they did, but they will remember the feeling of getting up in front of someone, having that person look at them and listen to them. I think a lot of our youth struggle with being listened to. They find it hard to find people that will listen to them. And through theater and through other activities that involve speech and drama, you have a captive audience, and that's powerful. And then to feel like you have something to say to that audience makes it even more powerful.
Well, I mean, all that's happening I think it's a very common thing. Like our teenagers are told to learn how to take tests and to be quiet in the classroom and to just sort of be passengers in their education at times. And so what a wonderful experience to turn that around a little bit. And again, just as you said, to have somebody listen to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they contribute all in the Spanish side, they contribute the details of the story. In the theater side, you really want to pull from them what the piece means to them. If you tell them what the piece means, that's what it means to you. But it can mean a completely different thing to them. And I've had some amazing, especially with some of my the beginning performers, it's a little bit more like put some emphasis here, things like that, move your body this way, this expresses this. When you do this, you're showing me this. But with those upper level performers especially, you can have some really really interesting conversations about why they picked this piece, or why this piece means something, this part, this certain section. Why does this one mean something to you? You have performers that will tear up because they've chosen something that means that much to them, that connects that strongly with their life. And it's really amazing to see.
And I think because it's another stereotype of the teenager, is that they're not having deep thoughts, and that they are shallow, and that they, they're on their phones and they're LOLing, and I think that's a detriment when we think of teenagers that way, that they are in fact complicated and complex.
I think they actually feel emotions more strongly than us, because to them, this is stereotyping a bit, but everything seems very urgent, very in the moment. So they feel, I can look and say, oh, in a couple months this will be past. But for teenagers, they live very much in the right now. And right now it's very painful, or right now it's very exciting. And that can be a fun energy. It can be an exhausting energy to be around, but it can also be a very fun energy to be around too. And they can use that. They can channel that passion in all kinds of different ways.
I'm always amazed at the energy and the, if you tell them, oh, we've got 2 days to put this play up or whatever, they're like, 2 days, you got it, I'm in, And they're like,
oh yeah, they especially. And then my campers, I tend to work with more like the junior high group at the camp age, so that 5th through 7th, 8th grade. And they're, oh my gosh, they are so much fun that way. If you can get them involved, they are in 110%. They give it everything. It's amazing to see what they can accomplish.
It's funny because, just writing for middle school and writing for high school, it took me a long time to find the value in that, because I'm supposed to be professional. I'm supposed to want these other things, and to realize that I don't want to work with jaded adult actors. I want to work with these wonderful, optimistic, enthusiastic, and sometimes just bursting youth. And it was the most wonderful thing when I went, no, it's like, now this is the success. This is the place to be.
Well, absolutely. And I feel like they won't necessarily become those jaded, sad adults if they learn early where to have fun, where to cut loose, where to let go. Our kids, they're so scheduled, so controlled. They're on their technology. To give them an outlet to explore their creative side and find ways to have fun that don't involve technology necessarily, or things. And I find, it's a really fun thing to witness too.
So, and this is a nice segue into one thing that when we were setting this up, that so Redemption of Gertie Green is about someone who is typed as a bully, and it's like, well, we see this and we see that and we hear this and we hear that, so therefore it all must be true, and this person must be this horrible thing. And what happens when that's not true, and how a drama class sort of comes together and works together and reveals the truth. And you talked about how about the power of theater in exploring difficult topics. And what does that mean to you?
I think theater is a safe space to explore difficult topics, because first of all, when you have a part, or even as a director, when you have a show, you're going to grow into that. First of all, you're just looking at the words, and then you're looking at what they mean, and then you're looking at the larger message of what the show is saying. And you have those light bulb moments about the different characters, the different experiences. And so I think it's a way to delve deeper and deeper into a topic without just rushing over it superficially, making a judgment on it. Because when you're an actor and you have to play a certain part, you sympathize with that part. You can't not like yourself. You have to like yourself as a character. And so you have to see where you're coming from, what's motivating you. And so I think when we explore difficult subject matter, something that can create a lot of opposition in people or can create judgment in people, theater gives us a way to sort of reverse that and say, hey, these are people too. They're having their own experiences. They're having their own feelings. They're coming at it from a different way than I do. They see things a different way than I do, but it's a safe space to explore that, because you're not necessarily giving up yourself or your own identity. You can still have your beliefs, but you can explore these other channels too without feeling threatened, I think. So that's one of the things I like about it.
Well, I just that whole notion of having a safe space where, again, a safe space where to be listened to, a safe space to maybe express something that just can't be expressed in an everyday life. And I think that's the other thing that theater does is theater brings out these situations that don't happen in everyday life. You know, like we don't often learn that the bully is somebody else, but if it's presented, it opens a door. Yes,
absolutely. That's very true. I really like how you said that because some of my kids in my camp haven't really dealt with bullying. They may be very lucky. They may not have dealt with it, but they can look at this issue and suddenly realize with some of the bullying education that we do where things are important, why, and even on a smaller scale, how kids look at each other, because kids have been taught or really have a tendency to put each other into categories, and any chance they can have to break free of those categories or to allow someone else to be something beyond just the category they've been put in, like, oh, you're a sports jock, that's what you are. You don't have anything beyond that. And I think something I really wanted to explore in Gertie was, well, the sports jock isn't always a sports jock, or the bully isn't always a bully, or, the nerd isn't always a nerd. Like there's more to them than that. And there's more beneath the surface than just what the superficial thing is that you show everybody else.
Well, and there's always something going on besides the face that we present in this case, in school, isn't there? Like, what's going on at the cheerleader's home? We don't know because it could, they could be a completely different person.
Absolutely. Saving face by acting a certain way, feeling a lot of pressure to act a certain way. And I think that's one of the reasons I tend to also love drama, is because there seems to be a tendency within drama and within the drama community, especially in the younger levels, to sort of embrace the weird, embrace the crazy. Mm-hmm. There isn't you don't have to conform in the same way because no one conforms, kind of. So, embrace the weirdo, etc. I don't want to call anyone a weirdo, but embrace the person that is unique or different, because you realize they bring something unique and different and a unique talent, unique gifts to your program, to your stage, to your play, things like that.
Well, it's just, and when you walk into a theater classroom, I'm okay. I'm okay with the word weirdo. I know exactly what that. I'm one, and just to see people who in other places, because that's the other thing. There's a lot of kids in these classes who they're not safe in other classes and they're not safe with other people because of how they've been labeled. And so I just to think that if there's anything that we can do to make, well, I'm going to repeat myself, but to make them feel safe, I think is a good thing.
Absolutely. And the other kids are a big part of that. I think I really like the role of Miss Fillmore in my show because she kind of fosters that community, that sense of community. But ultimately, it is up to the other students to extend that kindness to Gertie, to demonstrate to her that they aren't going to judge her, that they're going to give her another chance or a chance to see who she really is. And I think ultimately, teachers and all the people in authority, we can definitely create environments. But I think ultimately the kids need to take ownership and responsibility for the judgments that they're making, for the consequences of how they are treating people, and realize that they are the ones that have the power to then be kind and reverse that. So I think that's very important too, that the adults can absolutely be involved in that conversation and need to be involved in that conversation. But the kids themselves are the ones that have to step up and include people and not judge people and be kind to each other.
And I think that too, that's the issue sometimes with presenting difficult topics and presenting issues from a lecture standpoint or from a pamphlet or let's have an assembly, because there is an adult at the front who's saying this is how you should behave.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because the day of the show, when the director steps back, it's all in these kids' hands. They're the ones telling the story. And through theater, through any show you do that explores a difficult topic like that, especially if you use kids as performers, that's absolute. They are the ones telling the narrative, and they're delivering that message to other kids their own age, and that's an amazing tool. I think that's way more powerful than any adult getting up there. It'll resonate a lot more, I think, than than those assemblies or the videos or the online clicky click classes, things like that.
Well, it's because they're looking at someone who looks like them and talks like them, is the same age as them, and is saying things that maybe they have thought but were afraid to say. It's all about not being alone, you know?
Yes, that's very true. Absolutely. And yeah, kids can feel isolated or feel like they're the only ones going through something. And suddenly, that was really interesting actually during the rehearsal process is, we'd have a kid occasionally say, oh, yeah, I've had something like that happen to me, or, I know someone this has happened to, or I've thought this before. They kind of admit here and there, it comes out that something resonates with them, and they were, the fact that it's on paper and in a script, or that someone else in their script or their cast is saying a similar thing, all of a sudden like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one feeling strange and like a creep and like a freak. There is a place for me, and there are other people that feel this way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a totally silly question. So when I think of theater camp, and when I've had other conversations with theater camp, the plays have always been, I'm totally drawing a creative blank, but like, Mad Men on Mars, like just very silly. And what drives you, do you think, to put a little substance into the plays that you put on in the camp setting?
Well, to be fair, I would say a majority of mine have been relatively silly. So this one was kind of a step out of character.
How did it go? So let's go in that direction. So if it was a step out of character, how did that, what was the results?
Actually, the parent, the kids themselves really enjoyed it. They got really into it. They got kind of a meatier role, like they had more meat to explore. And I mean, there's also some fun stuff in there, so they liked that. But from a kid perspective, I had one girl say to her mom, and her mom hadn't seen the show yet and had no idea what it was about or anything. And she said to her mom, this year when I go back to school, I think I'm just going to be myself. And if people don't like me, that's their problem. And she was like, where's this coming from? And then she came and saw the show and was like, oh. And then I will tell you that the parent response was actually what surprised me. I had parents coming up to me afterwards that were just like, oh, thank you so much for doing this. And it was much less like, oh, good job, what a good show, and much more thank you for doing this for our kids. It was really interesting, for a camp show to have that kind of response. So I found that I really enjoyed it, and it kind of put thought in my mind, I need to do more of this. I think there's a balance, though. I think you can go a little too far the serious direction. I think it's good to have some light stuff mixed in with, well, and also just in general, you're more likely to cry if you've laughed first, if you've released that emotion and things like that too. But I found the response overwhelmingly positive from both my campers and from parents. They felt like they had seen something that meant something rather than just gone to a silly little show. So that was really nice.
I think that, well, first of all, my comment always is that if you want something to have impact, before you kick them in the gut, you have to make them laugh, and vice versa. Yes. And I've seen too many dramas where I have this very, very, very vivid image of an AIDS play in like 20 years ago where I was screamed at for 40 minutes, and I'm like, I will never do this because it's, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where issues are the most illuminated, when we've made the audience relax a little and laugh a little, and then.
Yeah, you can't change anyone if you alienate them. Like, you're not going to change any opinions if you alienate the person that's listening to your opinions. So I think bringing them along with you is a much better tactic, probably.
Yes, I love that. I love that image. More flies with honey than with vinegar? So something like that. We'll go with that. Exactly. Yes. Oh, Taryn, this has been lovely. So that's the Redemption of Gertie Green, which I will talk about. I will make sure we put a link in the show notes. And I love that you use theater in your Spanish class. I think that makes you a rock star.
Most of my students do. There are a few that are like, what did I sign up for? But a lot of them that aren't your stereotypical theater geeks are some of my best performers. So there you go. Everybody has a little theater in them.
Everyone's got theater in them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a delight.
All right. I'm here with Amanda Murray Cutalo. Hello, Amanda.
Hi, Lindsay.
Amanda is one of our playwrights. She's got 2 plays with us, Nice Girl, and a brand new one called Typecast. But you are a teacher, yes?
Yes, I am. I teach English, 10th and 11th grade.
Awesome. Okay. So my first question is then what is your connection to theater?
Oh, well, I mean, I started performing when I was in high school and fell in love with it, and continued through college. I was a theater minor, and I kept performing in community theater. And then when I started teaching, I had the opportunity to start directing. So I've been doing that for the past 10 years.
What was it about your high school experience that always stuck with you?
Oh, wow. I loved the opportunity to, I loved being up on stage. I loved performing with my classmates. And I guess I loved the opportunity to really jump into new characters, really just to try someone else on and become a different person, just for that short amount of time.
It's it's quite an experience. And now that you're on the other side as a director, what do you see in your students when they get up there?
Well, really, it takes me back. But I see a lot of the same things. I mean, when I ask them, usually as we begin a production, I ask them what they enjoy the most. And they say they love kind of slipping into this alternate reality and becoming somebody that they find, I guess, discovering a different version of themselves.
Well, and I mean, at this age that they're dealing with, being a teenager, being yourself, that's kind of I would say that's kind of when I look around, that's the hardest thing for them to do. Because they're finding themselves, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. And so I think gives them a great outlet and the ability to discover who they are by playing these different characters. And gives them a whole community of people that share that interest.
Do you find there's a safety in that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think especially I've just seen a lot of my more introverted students that I'll teach in class that they just come alive when they get up on stage, or we're doing theater activities during class where they're all of a sudden comfortable. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, I imagine. Amazingly so. You know, we all don't learn the same way, or we don't express ourselves the same way. I think that's the beauty of theater for them at this age. Mm-hmm. And here's another thing. So you're an English teacher. What theater do you incorporate into your classroom?
A lot. For instance, when we're learning new vocabulary words, we'll go over the words, and then I'll give them a situation, and they have to write and perform a skit where they use as many words as possible in the correct way. Or they'll write alternative scenes to plays that we study, like The Crucible or Streetcar Named Desire. We'll improvise scenes where, like, for instance, when we study The Scarlet Letter, we'll improvise a Puritan meeting where they're deciding the fate of Hester Prynne, and they have to all be the men of the town, which is fun because I teach at an all-girls school, so that's fun to watch.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And okay, so how is their response to that? Because I'm going to assume, rightly or wrongly, that this is not how English class usually goes.
No.
Yeah. So how does that go?
A lot of them get into it, especially, I said this before, but it's really fun to watch the quieter students that they feel a little bit self-conscious during the regular discussions, but then all of a sudden, I guess, they maybe feel safer because they're taking on a character and they're able to be a bit bolder with what they're thinking, what they're saying.
How does how does this kind of sort of cross-curricular approach, how do you think it helps their comprehension?
I think, well, there's a lot. it's much more kinesthetic. I think that because they're getting up and actually taking on a character, they are able to remember it more, especially when I ask at the end of the year what they remembered most from the class. A lot of times they will say the activities where they were completely immersed in the world that the author had created. So I think it's just the act of getting up it helps them to remember.
Do you get them to perform Shakespeare?
I do. I actually don't. I'm currently not teaching Shakespeare right now.
What? Oh
no! I know, but I did when I taught it. I taught Romeo and Juliet, and what else did I work with? Midsummer Night's Dream, and so we did do that.
Is there a reason for that? Why is it? Are they taking it out on purpose, or is it just because it's
covered in the other grades?
Right. Okay. I was going to say, don't take it away.
No, definitely not.
Okay. Yeah. So not only do you use theater in your classroom, which I just think it's awesome. Instead of, that certainly was not the way my English classes went. And I have an English degree.
No, it's fun for me too, because I'll jump in every now and then and play with the girls too. So I get just as much out of it as they do.
Well, that's what, we're told constantly. Oh, this is the generation that has the short attention span, and this is, that we're losing them with writing and whatever. And instead of like complaining about it, why not just find a different door? Like theater.
And I think that there are so many, right. I mean, there are so many ways to get them interested in something, and theater is such a great way to do that.
I agree 1,000%. Okay. So not only do you use it in your classroom, but then you also, do you often direct at your school?
I do one show a year. And currently right now I'm working with middle schoolers. We put on a one-act play one year, and then we'll alternate. The following year we do some sort of musical or musical review.
And you also write for them. So you're also doing original work.
Yes. The past two shows, I've been very fortunate. The middle school head said that I can write my own work for them and produce it. So that's been really fun.
And what was the impetus to that? Why did you decide I have to write something instead of find something?
I think that I often had difficulty finding good material for an all-girls cast, because I've always taught in an all-girls school that had a lot of parts available to the girls, and that was about a topic that they would be interested in, and not, I guess, that didn't have a romantic story to it.
Right.
Just because I wanted some variety. So that was one of the reasons why I did want to start writing stories that related to them in the best way that I could.
And do you have writing in your background, or was this something you dove into?
It's actually something that I used to do a lot in grade school, and then I just kind of forgot about it until until maybe 5 years ago, when I just said one day, I'm going to write a play. And so and the topic of Nice Girl, too, it was something that I felt it was a little autobiographical. And it was one of those days where I just had a bad day. And so I just said, I'm going to write something. And so that's what came out.
Well, that play, it's a very interesting, the theme of it is something that I hadn't seen before, because it is so very true. It's about how being nice you can be to your detriment, and I speak to middle schoolers a lot, and that whole notion of friends and best friends and what I'm going to do to keep a friend. I'm guessing you had lots of experience,
absolutely
lots of firsthand material.
I did. And in the situation that happened in Nice Girl, I've seen it happen so many times to my students where they come up to me after a project is over and they're so upset because they did all the work and, they didn't really know how to assert themselves while it was happening. And so they felt like they had no voice. Mm-hmm. And so that's another reason why I wanted to write the play.
So, what was your process when you wrote? Did you had a day and you got things down on paper, and then what was your process?
Well, I like to write down. I like to have a roadmap always, I guess. So I kind of just do a breakdown of the scenes of what I think I'd like. I guess what should happen in the scene. And then I do a lot of talking out loud. I like to talk to my friends. I talk to my husband, just to really get to the root of, I guess, to know what the story is about before I even start writing dialogue.
I like those two, because my next question to you was going to be like, because there are lots of the teachers out there who are sort of in the same boat as you. They want something very specific for their specific students, mm-hmm. and the result is often I should write something, but their next thought is I can't write something. So
yeah, now what?
and I like those 2 points there about just sort of figuring out the roadmap and then just talking out loud and just it's play, right? It's theater. So the more right. that it's sort of up and out is probably a really good thing.
Right. And that's I like the metaphor of the clay too, because that's just something I've learned along the way, that I can go into it with a very specific idea of what I'm writing about, but I need to also be flexible, and if it goes in a different direction, fine. So I think that's important too.
At what stage do you show it to your students?
I show it to them when I'm feeling pretty good about it. But I do a read through the summer, or I guess the summer before we actually put on the play, so that I can get their feedback and work on it one more time, just because I want to know, is it relating to them? Are there jokes that are just not working? So I'll show it to them maybe a few months before we actually start auditions.
And I think that's a third really great point, is that you're not writing this on the fly as the production's coming up. This is something that you've thought about a good 6 months beforehand and started work on.
Oh, absolutely. I'm working on my play for 2017 right now. I just finished my rough draft. So it's kind of a 2-year process, actually. Yeah,
well, that's a good way to think about it, because I'm sure that your time with work and stuff, that right. That writing, you must have to really sort of slot it in, or like make time to write or schedule.
Right. I think also it helps to just put a piece of writing to bed for 6 months and then take it back out again and see if you still are happy with it. I know I've been horrified sometimes when I've looked at some, it just sometimes just takes time.
I think that's one of the most useful things, is when you get to the end of a first draft, the next thing is to just stick it in a drawer for a little mm-hmm. bit if you can, because everything, the play writing, and I think plays, they take time, and as you think about them, then questions form, and then like going back to a piece with a fresh eye is one of your greatest assets.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so you show it to them. You let it. You work on it over the summer. And do you get suggestions? Like, do you let them go, oh, can I say this instead of this? Oh, what if this happened? Like, what is your yes. collaborative process? Yes, you do that, huh?
I do. Yeah. I kind of make that clear to them from the very beginning. And I'll say there are some things that I'm very, that need to stay the same, that I have a certain vision, but there are other parts that we can definitely change, or, if it feels more natural for you to say something differently, definitely tell me about that. we were making changes to Typecast up until maybe the week before. I mean, little tweaks, not major changes, but I told them just be patient with this process because this script is going to grow as you become more into your characters.
Well, and that's the point. I think that's a great point if you want to write for your students, and also in the writing, it is a process, and it takes time, and better to let it take time than to rush something that maybe could be improved upon.
Right, exactly. And especially, if it's organic to the process, I think it's important. Some of my students have just accidentally said lines that weren't the original one, and we've changed it because it worked better.
I actually love it when that happens, when they say, when it just comes, when a rearrangement of words comes out of their mouth naturally. Right. And it's like, well, that's better. I'm just going to change that.
Or it's truer to the character,
And how do your students feel about being part of this process?
They have a lot of fun with it too. They're really excited that they're doing the first version of the show, and they get really into it.
It's a new thing. It must be so interesting to not only just be handed a play that's finished, but to be handed a play that's in progress.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what would you get? So what piece of advice? So if you're talking to a teacher who is scared of writing for their students, what are a couple of pieces of advice that you would give them?
So you mean if they were actually
they got this group, they've got this group that they cannot find a play for. They know the answer is, I got to write something for myself, but I'm terrified. What would you say?
Right. I think I like having conversations with the actual students. If nothing, I'd like to know what are the major issues that they feel are relevant to their age group. And I've gotten so much just from talking to them, I guess, about what it's like to be in middle school or high school. And I think that's a good place to start, to get a good concept down.
I agree. When I write my middle school, myself when I write middle schools, I am very lucky that I have a nice relationship with a school with incredibly talkative youngsters who are dying to tell me what their life is like, and it's remarkably dissimilar to what I think some adults would like everybody to believe that middle school is like.
Right.
And
yeah. Or you forget. So I think that's important, that it needs to come from a real place.
I think so too. And that also that it's written specifically for them too, like that it's not a fairy tale and that it's not a truncated high school play, but that it's for, 11 and 12-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and then just as we wrap up here, so Nice Girl, which is, it's really clear in your work that you're really have your students' stories at heart, because I really loved getting a Typecast because it's the kind of thing that happens. I think it happens a lot in middle school plays, not out of a place of malice, but out of a place of, well, that guy's going to do great for that role because he's already like that. Right,
exactly. I think we all do, as directors, I think that we all do it even if we don't want to, that we'll go into an audition process and even have certain students in mind that we know would be a good fit for a role.
And then I quite like but then there is, and then the other thing that also happens is the typecasting in life. I find it remarkable that, I haven't been in middle school in, let's say 30 years, 40 years, long time. And that the same issue, that same pigeonholing of students is that they're like that. They're always going to be like that. That it's something that it's very hard to break free of.
Right. that they see it. I think at that age too, it's difficult because I know we had said before that they're trying to define who they are to find their identity. And so if they get casted in a series of the same parts over and over again, I think it's very easy for them to identify that as who they are on stage and in life.
You have to play that part, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So to have that sort of turned upside down theatrically, because then here is what theater does most wonderfully, is to take these situations that we see every day and then to sort of turn them on their ear, and to have these characters who are forced to sort of play parts that they aren't in life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The girl who says nothing is just who's going to be the rock in the corner, is the one who has to have all the lines. And, as someone who was a rock in the corner, it's wonderful. It must have really been inspiring to see this play come to life, I think. I hope.
It was so much fun. And just even, from the first auditions, when girls would come in and they would just nail certain characters because they fit. I actually did have to cast this play according to type. They had to fit that specific look. But then it was really fun during the rehearsal process because the characters, a lot of them become more multidimensional as the story goes on. It was fun to watch those actors kind of go through the same process, through that same discovery.
It's almost like they're learning.
Yep.
I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much. It was just, you know what? I am tickled to pink that you use theater in your English classroom like that. I just think I think that's lovely. Thank you so much for doing that, Amanda.
Well, I have a lot of fun with it.
I'm glad. And it's just one of those things where you always hear the negatives about what's happening with education and stuff. So it's and stuff. That's very specific, Lindsay. And
I know what you mean, though.
Yeah. So I just think that's at any time that there's a place for theater in a place where it doesn't normally show up. I say congratulations, and also congratulations on Nice Girl and Typecast. I just think that. Just in hearing you talk about them, I just love your mentality, your point of view in giving these kids a voice. I think that the more I write, the more I realize that these are the kids that need plays for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to write plays for them.
I agree with you 100%. So, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Amanda and Taryn. Before we go, let's do some Theatrefolk news. It's a play feature. It's time to feature a play. And today I want to feature the plays of our lovely guests. So first we have Nice Girl. So the question that is asked in Nice Girl is there such a thing as being too nice? So we have a student at an all-girls school. Do you have lots of girls in your program? And that it's the whole idea that this character is too nice. She knows that she should be strong and she should be assertive and stand up for herself, but she's the kind of girl who does her friends' homework, lets people cut in front of her in line, and pretends to be someone she's not in order to get a boy to like her. And she keeps learning over and over again how being a nice girl actually requires a lot of frustration and sacrifice. And what happens when she reaches her breaking point and decides that it's time to not be so nice? Love it. That is Nice Girl. There will be a link in the show notes. And then Typecast. I love the stuff that Amanda, the themes and the concepts that Amanda writes about. And here, this is all about the whole notion of typecast and putting people into roles. And what happens when we ourselves think that the roles and the types that we have put into are the right ones for us. The auditions are coming up for an upcoming production. Excellent. That makes sense. And that the teacher is the one who, she connects people to the roles who she thinks that they're a good fit for. Like the nice girl gets the ingenue, the diva gets the villain, the quiet girl gets to be the role of a rock. And what happens when everyone gets cast to type and then another teacher comes in and changes it all up? So everybody is put in a role which is not to their type. So what happens when the diva girl who expects the lead only ends up with a couple of lines? And what happens when the nice girl becomes the villain? All of these characters have to deal with being cast as someone who they're not usually cast as. They have to venture into unknown territory and forced to see themselves as more than just a type, which I think is fantastic. Okay, last one. We have The Redemption of Gertie Green by Taryn Temple. And again, this is another play which is about perception. And what I love about this play is that it's about the perception of the bully and about how everybody sees someone act in a certain way or hears about, this is even more to the point, hears about how somebody acts and thinks that they're a bully and therefore that's all that they are. Everybody talks about how Gertie Green is knocking down football players, getting suspended. Teachers are afraid of her, but is she really this terrifying monster that everybody talks about? And in The Redemption of Gertie Green, the truth comes out. Gertie is not what everybody calls her, a freak, strange, clumsy, mean. And it's up to a class of drama students to see past all of that, to discover the real person behind the rumors. What do we think when we actually know someone for who they really are? So that's 3 plays. We have Nice Girl, Typecast, and The Redemption of Gertie Green. You can find the links for all of these plays in the show notes at theatrefolk.com/episode 150. And finally, where can you find this podcast? We post new episodes every second Tuesday at theatrefolk.com and on our Facebook page and Twitter. You can find us on youtube.com/theatrefolk and on the Stitcher app. You can subscribe to TFP on iTunes. Novelty! Shocker! And all you have to do is search for the word Theatrefolk. And that's where we're going to end. Take care, my friends, my good friends. Take care.